award submissions before the season starts. It makes the season a lot easier if you get this done before the season, and it's a lot harder to do during the season. Prepare materials, wheels, stock, channel, tube, motors, etc., motor controls, whatever you're going to need for the season. Swerve modules, if you're deciding to do swerve, have those ready for the season. Cost 694. Make sure all your machines are in working order so that you're not repairing them when you need them. Train new and old members. It's a little late for this, but attend off-season events. Off-season events are the best way to train drivers, to train pit members, to learn. I try to get our team to attend as many off-season events as is realistically possible. I recommend that you attend as many as you can. They're pretty inexpensive. They're one day generally. They're over weekends, so the barrier for entry is usually pretty low. There are a lot of great off-season events all along the Northeast. I recommend attending as many as you can. And identify your team limits. So that might be your schedule. That might be the machines you have. That might be the people you have. Be realistic about these limits because you're not going to, like, for us, right? We're not going to be able to build the same robot that the cheesy poofs make. We don't have all the same resources though. We're not going to make the same robot as the Robonauts make. They literally work out of NASA. We have a lot of resources, so our limits have definitely kind of raised a bunch, but be realistic. Build the best robot that you can, not the best. That's not always going to be, and usually not going to be the best robot that's out there. Realistically, at the end of the day, everyone's final match of the season will either, except for 3 teams, will be a qualification match or a loss. Except for 3 teams. So most teams aren't going to be the best team in the world, but figure out what you can do to reach your goals for the season within your limitations. So identifying those limitations is incredibly important. And make a schedule for your season. You don't need to know what the game is to make a schedule for your season. Everyone's is going to look a little different, and obviously this changes depending on what your first event is. If you're competing week 1 first versus week 5 first, your schedule is going to look probably very different, and your motivations to get stuff finished is probably going to be very different. So make the schedule before the season starts and try to stick to it. This is our schedule. Weeks 1 through 2, we prototype, we design. Week 3, we finalize our robot's design and we begin manufacturing it. Weeks 4 through 5, those are when we build the robot. And generally, we hope that the robot's done like halfway through week 5. Usually it's end of week 5. Sometimes it extends into week 6. Depends on how complicated the robot is and our other limitations. Week 6 and 7, those are for programming, driver practice, and iteration. This last chunk, the importance of it cannot be overstated. If you think that you're going to build a robot and get it programmed and it's going to be good to go in a couple of days, you're delusional. It needs time. We always say break faster. The first version of the robot and the last version of the robot are always wildly different because the more you play, the more you try your robot, the more you're going to realize, oh, I can make this thing better, or oh wait, that broke like instantly, or that broke when we collided into the wall, or when we picked up the 4th game piece at the corner. It's even the best engineers, the greatest teams in the world, they are going to have lots and lots and lots of problems
to get the selection committee to pick you in the first place. That one is pretty commonly thought of as a reason. But there's also a second reason, which is the attendees. At a lot of conferences, like today, there's multiple talks going on at the same time. And people only have 2 things to choose based on. 3 things to choose based on. One is the title of your talk. The second one is your abstract. And the third one maybe is your name or background. Sometimes like, oh, I'm going to go to that talk because Venkat's a really good speaker. I don't care what he's speaking about. I want to see him speak. Venkat is a Java speaker. He is amazing. So I see his name and I'm done. I'm choosing that one. But it helps people know what are they going to get out of the talk, should they go, and are they the target audience? right? If you're going to be giving a talk on mechanical design, unless it's super basic, I'm not going to follow it. And I should know that from the abstract and go somewhere else. And the people who have that more advanced knowledge are going to be able to go to that talk and appreciate it. You don't want someone to be in the room just to be in the room, right? You want people who are going to learn and be engaged. And if that's not the case, they should be in a different room. So tips on picking your abstract. First, think about the topic, right? We all did that. We picked a topic of here's something someone could talk about. Then think really specifically, what do you want your audience to remember, right? What do you want them to take away from this talk? For me, it's how to write an abstract and maybe motivate people to present in the future. I'm going to put Howard and Brian on the spot because you guys spoke today. Can one of you tell us what takeaway you had for your attendees?
Finish your robot early.
All right, finish your robot early.
I guess the bigger picture takeaway is you don't have to have the best robot to win original.
I was looking more for the second one.
Yeah.
Because the second one is more like a theme, right? If people go back to their team and say, what did you learn at Brian's talk? We don't have to have a perfect robot. We need to get it done, right? That's an elevator pitch. That's something they can remember. You don't want them to say, oh, Brian gave a really good talk. It was about robots. Like, that's great, right? Then they haven't taken away that thing. And knowing what the takeaway is lets you write a better abstract because it lets you focus on the thing you're trying to do. You still get the talk. Nobody's not coming because they read your summary. But you let them think, oh, okay, so I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be primed to hear about how I can win with this robot. What is important? What should I sacrifice, right? I probably shouldn't sacrifice driving and say, well, my robot doesn't drive, but here it is. It allows them to make that decision and be in the right mindset. And it also lets them be excited about that presentation. That is a really good presentation. I didn't go because I wanted to support one of the kids on my team, but I'm going to watch it on video tomorrow. So do you want people to learn something? Do you want them to acquire a skill, right? We're all going to learn how to gesture with our hands during this presentation or something. And remember to keep audience focused as you're writing your abstract. A lot of the time, people are tempted to write their abstract in the third person, right? Robots are good. They're built of metal. They're programmed in languages. The end. No. Be more engaging. Right, you're going to come to this presentation, you're going to learn about FIRST Robotics and what it entails to build a robot. I'm using the active voice and I'm letting people envision themselves there. So using language like attendees will or you will helps you think about the attendees and keep them focused. And most importantly, remember this during the actual presentation too. I've seen people who write really good abstracts thinking about the audience and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. Thank you for coming. Like, oh, okay, but what was the audience part of that, right? This isn't a book report. All right, now we're going to do a few abstracts that are not good abstracts and see if people can identify what's wrong with them. So our first abstract is this talk is about math. Why is this a bad abstract? Yeah, this is ridiculously broad. I have no idea what this talk is about. I don't know if it's the right level of math. I don't know if I'm interested in it. And I have no idea what this person is going to be talking about. Not a good abstract. But this is why this presentation exists. I used to see abstracts like this, and I never want to again. Okay. Our second bad abstract. What went wrong with our robot? Yeah, it's still too vague. It's better than math. But you don't know what it's about. And more importantly, you don't know if the scope of this is going to be something you care about, right? Is this going to be a hardware talk? Is this going to be a software talk? Is this going to be a strategy talk? This is something I want to know before the talk. And we're back to the example about mechanical. If this is going to be about all the specific parts of the robot and how they failed, I'm not interested. There's other people on the team that do that would be super interested, but I'm not going to follow it. I would rather be at a different talk. If it was about how autonomous failed, that's my talk. So let people know what they're going to hear. Give them enough detail that they can tell whether this is the talk for them. Okay, this one's long, so we don't have the problem if it's too short. Are you hiring interns? Come learn how to choose the best candidate from a stack of resumes. You won't even need to do an interview, and you'll have the perfect person. What's wrong with this?
When you hire for, so you basically say like, oh, we should hire you because you don't know what it's about. So So it just means that I am somebody who doesn't know what they're gonna get a job for.
Okay. I didn't think of that, so that wasn't what I was going for, but that is true. So let's pretend that I had a sentence at the beginning that was super specific about the type of internship and exactly what I wanted. It's still about abstract. Why, Ryan?
It's making a very big promise.
Yeah, does anyone believe this? Of course not. That's what interviews are for. Howard? That's not the problem with the abstract. Contractions are fine. Brian nailed it. That was what I was going for. This is a marketing pitch. This is not believable. And if you can't believe my abstract, you're also not going to believe my talk, so you don't need to go to it. It is not possible to pick the perfect person from a stack of resumes unless you're picking someone at random, in which case you could have just picked a random number, which is how we're going to give away the book later. But that's not good. It's detailed. It's specific, minus the first sentence that I didn't think to add. But it's not a believable talk. And I saw one like this as well, where it promised the world, and it's like, really? So you say. You also have to make sure that the audience knows why the thing is important. If they can't follow why they should go to your talk, they're not going to. There are many different forms of abstracts. And I have a template that I like to recommend to people when you're starting out. I follow it still because it lets you write the abstract quickly and it lets it be effective. The first thing is an optional hook. This is either a statement or a question to get people in the mood of what you're talking about. It lets them know, oh, I should read this. Then what is the topic and why should I care about it? Right? Your robot doesn't need to be perfect. We know what the topic is. What are the takeaways? Why should people attend? If you come, we're going to help you prioritize what are the most important parts of your robot. And finally, a call to action and a conclusion. And this is the one that's important to be in the you or attendees will. Help them envision themselves there or not, right? Software developers will learn, blah, 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 right? At the impact presentation, you will learn. Make sure there's that connection. They can see what's going on. I often get asked what's the right length for an abstract. There's no right answer to that, but it can be too long or too short. If it's a sentence or two, it's too short. And if it goes on and on and on, it's too long. But there's not an exact length for a perfect abstract. If you have a target audience, mention it. I gave a talk once that was meant for managers. I almost never do that. Most of my talks are for developers or presentation skills. I put it in the subject because I knew people would see my name and accept a different talk. So I was like, I'm going to put in the title, Java for Managers. So now we're going to use the template, see how it fits in. So first up, we have a hook. Have you ever wondered how conference speakers start out? Thinking about submitting yourself? Topic. In this session, we'll go over how to write a CFP. I spelled it out. I don't want to assume people know that. Or abstract, and tips on actually presenting. Come join us for a fun session and take away key skills. Then we have the conclusion, the call to action. Whether you hope to present at a session like this one, or champs, or just learning for the future, this talk is for you. So I'm pretty explicit about why you should come to this talk. And if somebody is reading this and it's like, I never want to speak to another human being for the rest of my life, there are 3 other talks going on right now. They should go there. All right, we're going to go back to our groups, same groups as before. And we're going to try to follow this template in order to write an abstract. This time I'm not going to call on you at the end, so you don't have to memorize it. But whether it's a topic you picked before or like New York City is fun, try to go through these pieces and see if you can put together an abstract in your groups. One more minute. All right, we're gonna start again. Raise your hand if you're ready. All right. So that was it about the abstracts. I mentioned that already. So now we're going to talk about how to actually do a presentation, right? You got accepted. Woohoo! Now it's time to actually present. Okay, so there's some classic advice here. I don't agree with all of it, but I can't not expose you to it. Use 24 font size, don't have more than 7 bullets, don't have more than 7 words per line, use pictures and images. Okay, great. There's some caveats here. First of all, you want to have as few words on a slide as possible and have it be as big as possible, which means it's okay to have different font sizes on different slides. Having a whole pile of empty space is just wasted space. Also, 7 is too many. People aren't going to remember 7 things, right? So you've just given them too much. There's no fee for having more slides. It's okay to have a point per slide or 2 points per slide. Having more slides is a good thing. A long time ago, there was a thing about how like you should have a slide per minute or 2 minutes or something ridiculously like that. I don't know why. We were still presenting online, but people have moved away from that in favor of less slides and more visuals, and I think that's a good thing. If you're presenting online, you can get away with a smaller font size because people are on their computer. They're fairly close to the computer. So 20 point font size is just fine on a computer. You want to avoid having too much information, however, though. So if you're using a smaller font, it's because you're trying to show something like here's a table of data, not just while we're online, I can cram a lot of data on the slide. And it should still be big enough. This is size 14, which is too small in a presentation. People aren't looking at it full screen. They've got the visual, they've got you, maybe they've got another window open. And yes, you can zoom in on your computer. But if you make me zoom, I now have a job, and it's not listening to you. It's find what's important on the screen as you're talking, which is going to directly conflict with listening to the message you're trying to send me. So don't make people zoom. Our new little show of hands thing. I have 4 slides here, and I want to see what people think is best. Who thinks slide 1 is best? 2? 3? A lot of 3s. 4? 4. So we're about half and half. I'm in the 4 camp. I like that the bullets are spread out a little from each other because it makes it easier to skim or look at quickly. But both 3 and 4 are fine. On some level, this is a matter of personal preference. Just being deliberate about which one you choose is helpful. All right. So then we have the whole why are we in this in the first place? Go back to the abstract. Put some effort into it. It got picked. People read it. They remember what you said you were going to speak about. And you want to meet that commitment. It's super annoying when you read an abstract, get really excited that we're going to cover what was in the beta test this year, and then get there and find out, oh, there was no beta test this year, right? And now it's like, well, I feel ripped off. So, remembering the audience read that, remembering what they're looking for is helpful. And sometimes you have to adapt during the presentation, right? Sometimes you'll start a presentation like about an advanced Java thing, and it's like, all right, raise your hand if you used Java before. There's 2 people who've used Java. Well, that's no good. I'm making it up. This talk is not about Java. I don't care who knows Java. But it's a problem if I'm giving a presentation on Java. So if I'm doing that, it's like, all right, I guess I'm going to introduce everything I speak about and skip covering advanced material because it's not going to work. That's only a problem with technical presentations. In business, I feel like you're not going to have that problem. But it can happen in strategy too. If you're giving a talk on strategy and you ask people on a scale of 1 to 5, what would you know about first? And everyone says, what's first? Guess what? Your strategy talk has just changed, right? Because now you have to explain what first is. You have to explain the rules. You have to explain what Thomas is. You have to explain what alliances are. You have a whole backstory on your hands. That is not what you intended to speak about. And it's not going to be in your slides, but that's okay. You still have to catch the audience up for your slides to make sense. You're going to have to annotate things. You're going to have to remind people what things mean. Remembering the audience is why they're there. And, the people who showed up are the people who are there to learn, so you got to accommodate them. Images. Images are super useful in a presentation. They take up space, they add fun, they convey information. There's a whole pile of places to get images from. Some of them are, I'm going to say, more free than others, right? Obviously, anyone can take a screenshot from the internet and use it, but some images are allowed to be used for reuse and, officially. So you can go to Google and search the images, and if you click on the advanced section tools and search by type, you can choose Creative Commons license, which allows you to reuse it with pretty much no restrictions. There's a lot of images there. Oh, that's the math team timer. The first time that happened, it scared me. I was like, is that a fire alarm? Like, no, good. So the next place you can get images is ones you've made yourself, right? Screenshots of things you're working on. When you do this, remember that you're taking a screenshot. So you want to use what I call reactive screenshots. Either zoom in, or even easier, make your browser super narrow. That will force the web page to adapt to a narrower screen, which is why it's called reactive, and allow you to take a screenshot that's going to be readable within your presentation at a super huge font. So this is our calendar for the team. You can see today is on it. And for anyone who's ever looked at this calendar before, Sty people, it doesn't look like this on your computer, right? It is much bigger, there's more going on. But this is what it looks like on essentially an iPad, or if you zoom in, or if you have terrible vision. You can also take the same screenshot, even more zoomed in, and highlight the thing we care about. So this is our December calendar. As you can see, StuySplash is today. This calls a lot more attention to it than what I did in the previous screenshot, because my point is to highlight StuySplash, not the entire calendar. You could put an arrow, or you can zoom in so much that pretty much all of that is available. I like this one best, though, because it gives you the context of where you are. Right? You have enough of a calendar to understand that we're looking at a calendar here, but it focuses in on the thing I want you to see. We have animations. I've been using those consistently, one thing at a time. Then there's the links for later. Tiny URL is your friend. If you give a tiny URL, people can remember it. Right? I can remember tiny URL 694 presentation. I'm not going to remember a full long URL. It helps you generate URLs that are usable. When doing a demo, remember why you're using the demo. The number one failure of demos is tech. And the second failure point is that you're doing it like it's a science project. Remembering the audience, remember them, they're important, is about letting the demo be about what they need. Right? I don't care about the 18 steps to click on in order to do something. I care how I can accomplish it. So letting me know that in the demo and up front, all right, this is why we're doing this demo, is helpful in making sure that it's a useful demo. Having a second person, as mentioned earlier, for the demo is also helpful. And having a backup. If your demo is anything technical, you need to have a backup plan in case the demo fails. It could be screenshots, it could be a video, it could be someone who's going to talk about it. I don't think the Robo-Tigers needed a backup because nothing's going to go wrong with here's the reel, pass it around. Right? That's a very low-tech demo. But for anything that's live, you have to be super careful. And you all got to see that today. It wasn't even a demo, but I started my presentation without a screen. And, you have to run with whatever happens. When I was new to presenting, I would print out my presentation on paper, and I would use that if I have to. But I've given this presentation before, so I wasn't worried about that. Right. Interactivity. There's nothing more boring than going to a talk and 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 a talk, right? That's like school or boring meetings at work for the adults. You need to make sure people's brains are awake. And that's hard because it's been a long day and we have competing things and there's a thing on the mind and I'll go swimming later and all of that stuff. So how do you engage people? The most common way is polls, right? There was the raise your hand if you knew Java thing. We did some group workshops because this particular talk was suited to them. But asking people for things, right? Think about this. All right, one person tell me this. It breaks it up a little and it lets people feel engaged. There's a book series called Head First. And in the intro, they go, your brain knows what it's important. It's being chased by a tiger. That's great, right? But then they get to why this matters. Well, we have to convince our brain that things are important. And that's where cartoons and games and points and being alert fit in. Don't call on people. Ask them to raise their hand and then call on people, right? You don't want, hey, Howard, what do you think about this? It's like, I don't want to talk about it. We talked about groups. Next up is what do you need to present logistically? You need to think about a few things, whether you're at home or in person. The first one, ironically, is projection. We have projection. Yay! The next one is how are you going to see the screen, right? The way for not to see the screen is to go like this. Well, the next thing is that you need a clicker. You want to talk to the audience. That means you need another screen that is not the one being shared. In person, that's typically a laptop in front of you. At home, it's a second screen, or worst case, a printout, hopefully a second screen, so that you have something that's different than what the audience sees in order to see what's coming. And the clicker allows you to move around. Clickers are pretty cheap. They let you move around during your presentation, so if you're in person, you can go places that aren't being coupled to the screen. Any speaker notes you have, you can have those. In PowerPoint, you're able to put on preview mode and have text that's there, or you can have notes on an index card or whatever, but anything that you need as a reference for yourself. A timer. How do you know whether you're running out of time? In this room, there's a clock. I have my phone because I can't see so well, so I can't read that clock, right? Maybe you have somebody with a card that reminds you of you're halfway through, some way of knowing where things are. And if you're online, you need to have a chat window open so you see if there's confused people in your presentation. In person, you can see confused people in real life. Next up, we have an evaluation. This font is too small. I'm sorry. I wanted to get it all on one screen. I spoke at a conference this year called UberConf. It is the conference I've been to that is the most on top of speaker feedback that I've seen in my entire life. You get a speaker feedback form that includes a whole pile of things. You've got your overall rating. Most conferences do that. I'm used to that. Then you got, was the level of the session right? Like, all right, that's a good one, right? Did you speak to your target audience? Would you recommend it to others? That's a good one. If you said it was okay, but you wouldn't recommend it, they probably don't want you back. Then how was the speaker? How was their style and delivery? Did they talk to you? Did they talk to their shoes? Who knows? Did the speaker have a good knowledge of the subject? You want to be learning from someone who knows their subject. That doesn't mean that you're an expert on everything. It means you know the thing you're talking about, right? So the people in their back, do they remember what it's like to be a rookie team, right? They probably do because it was last year, right? Do I remember what it's like to be on a rookie team? No idea. I would get 0. I have no business talking about that. If there were handouts, how was the quality of the handouts? Then we have the content. Was it consistent with the description? Remember, deliver on what you promised the audience. You don't want to surprise them with, oh, we're going to talk about something else today. Was there new information? You want to learn something in a talk. Did it meet your expectations? That's an interesting one because people come in with all sorts of expectations. I had one guy who filled this out and wrote, I expected that I wouldn't like the talk and I didn't like the talk. And I'm reading his comments. It's like, why did you pick my talk? Right? There were other talks going on at the same time. And I found out what happened later. He went with some other people from work and they said they were each going to attend one breakout in that slot and he drew the short straw. So none of them wanted to go to a talk on that topic and he had to. And, if you go into a presentation like, I'm not going to learn anything there, like, guess what you're not going to learn about? So I was a little annoyed about that, but sure. Then they asked on free form, what did you like and what would you improve? So that's a lot to think about, but these are all of the things that are important to the audience and therefore should be important to you as a speaker. Before I do questions, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and because I want to show the URL of this presentation that I read to you. I know my last name isn't that easy, so I'm worried that it got lost on the way. You know how I do it. Okay, now we're going to do a few minutes of questions and then the book giveaway. Who has a question? Is that a hand? I can't tell. Yes. How do you handle when you freeze up? Good question. The best way is to present with somebody else because the odds of you freezing at the same time are low. And also the less experienced speaker is more likely to freeze. When I present at work, I try to present with someone who's entry level to give them the opportunity. And I tell them at any point during the presentation, you say, and now Jean will, whatever, right? And now Jean will speak or Jean will answer that. So they have that less pressure. If you're speaking by yourself, pawn it off and someone else doesn't work. And you just deal with it. You freeze and at some point you unfreeze and you recover. You can make a joke out of it or you can pretend it didn't happen. The nice thing is people don't care. As a speaker or a new speaker, we get all in our heads about that. And I've stumbled a couple times during this presentation. Nobody cared. Nobody's going to be like, oh, that's a terrible presentation. You said 2 words wrong. So it's just, move past it, go back to the content. The people are there for the content, and that's the most important thing. And I saw Brian nodding, so I'm curious if you want to add to that.
Yeah, there's one big thing I wanted to add. Anytime you freeze up, it feels a lot more.
Must ones. We tagged auto stuff in blue. And you kind of see how this kind of shaped our robot. You see cone pickup from ground, knocked over cone was priority 8. So that's really high on our priority list, and it made its way onto our robot clearly. Like that really influenced our intake. Right or wrong, it really influenced our intake and influenced what our robot looked like. A lot of teams rank that really low, and their robot looked different as a result. So maybe looking back, like maybe we shouldn't have done that part. Maybe it hurt us, but we decided during kickoff and through our game analysis that, hey, it was really important to do this, and it shaped our prototyping, our development, everything. So it's very important to make these priority lists, not just to make the right decisions, but also to be unified as a team around these decisions. Right or wrong, we were unified as a team. There was never a question of should we be, scrapping this from the robot because, hey, it was really high on our priority list, so there was never an argument about it. It didn't eat up our time arguing about it. And see, we listed out a bunch of tasks, and some of them we decided not to do. 5 game piece auto. We did not achieve that task. We decided not to go for that one. Okay, and then we did group them. Must do. We took all of those and we grouped them into must do, want to do, nice to have, don't do. Had some notes, some qualities we wanted to have. Low center of gravity, durable, fast, accurate, all that good stuff. Some wants, gentle-ish cube placement, pick up and score on opposite sides. Pick up and score on opposite sides, we really decided to make that a bigger priority than just a want, but it was a want. And then we had a long discussion on swerve versus tank, and we ended up deciding on swerve, but it was very close to being tank. Now we know how to do swerve, so final decision swerve. Now we know how to do swerve, so we feel a lot more comfortable with it, so that conversation will probably be a lot shorter this year. All right. Andrew, when is the break? I want to make sure. What time is the break at?
It's in 13 minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any questions on kickoff before I jump into prototyping? Or the stuff from the slides? I'll also give time for questions at the end, but I want to make sure I give time for questions now as well. No? All good, Andrew? Okay. So, prototyping. Now that you know what you want your robot to do, you've made a priority list, it's time to figure out the ways to do it. Don't rule out crazy ideas immediately because they could lead you down a good path, but you do have to narrow things down. You can't test absolutely every idea. Resources are limited. People are limited. We all know when there's just a bad idea, right? Like, we know the difference between a really horrible idea and that's interesting. 2019, we ended up with a suction cup to climb, and that was kind of crazy. We didn't kick it aside because it had some merit and it achieved some of our priorities. And so we tested it and we prototyped it. Other times, if someone says use a suction cup to pick up a game piece, there have been some solid robots that have done that, but we generally toss that to the side because that's really hard to do. It's not simple. It's going to eat up a lot of resources, so we kind of sweep that to the side. So pretty much anytime anyone says use a suction cup to pick up a game piece, we kind of sweep that to the side. So it's important to be able to tell the difference between like an idea that is decent and should be experimented with, and this is a wild idea. This is not within our limitations. This doesn't meet our goals. Let's brush that aside. Paring down your prototypes is helpful and important. Remember that you're not looking for the best design. You're looking for the right design for your team. Every team is different. And I like to always say, this is a Bill Belichick quote, if we're all wrong together, we can still be right. You can pick the wrong design and still be really, really freaking good. If you are united in it, if it is pointed at your priorities and your tasks, you can still be really good. I think back to our season this year. We had this crazy wooden spatula on our bot that we realistically never used after our. Well, we used it in our first competition a bit. It turns out triple balancing was a lot easier than we initially thought, and it was pretty useless. But we were pretty united as a team to have it on there, and we were wrong to have it on there. But at least we were united, and I think our robot still turned out pretty good. So sometimes you can have the wrong idea, but as long as you're together on it as a team, you can still go to a really good place. Prototyping is not just for picking which mechanism will work, but also for determining dimension, motor requirements, selecting materials. So don't just use prototyping as like proofs of concept. Try to figure out what will really work, what the sizes are going to be for your robot, so that you're not figuring this stuff out just in CAD. Give yourself an idea of what compression you need on a game piece, what speed you need a shooter to be spinning to actually score a goal. Not just, oh, I can see now that a motor with this wheel can score a goal. No. What wheel works best? What motor setup works best? You should do all of this during prototyping. And my number one tip for prototyping and for robot design, rollers are usually the answer when it comes to game piece acquisition, manipulation, and launching. Even when you think they aren't the answer, they're probably the answer. So like, stare at a game piece and figure out how you're going to pick it up with rollers. I think when we first saw the cones, we weren't like all thinking rollers maybe, but I wasn't thinking rollers are the right solution. I knew rollers were the right solution, and then I was thinking, how can rollers be used to do this? And it turned out that the best way to do it was to grab the tip of the cone with two rollers and bring it up that way and score it out the other way. Rollers are, in FRC, they're almost always the best way for game manipulation. So you should start your prototyping with rollers always. Monitor robot in 3 days for ideas and resources. For those who are unfamiliar, there is right after kickoff for a first week or two, there are a bunch of people and teams around the world who are putting out videos on YouTube and Chief Delphi of prototypes, and a lot of them are building full-on robots to play the game, and that can help you with coming up with, first of all, how the game is played better, but also some different mechanism ideas that you can prototype yourself. A lot of the time, we will have at least one mechanism that was birthed from a robot in 3 days that we saw. Also, this year, with the kit of parts, they're including the kit bot, which is going to be a full-on robot that plays the game, similar to the Everybot that 118 has been releasing. Even if you aren't building it, which I think for a lot of teams it is a great solution, especially if your team has been struggling for a number of years, it is a great solution to spend a year, build that robot, optimize that robot, improve that robot, and just kind of learn to be really efficient and have a robot that's durable and doesn't break. Durable and doesn't break doesn't mean the same thing. But even if you aren't building it, there's going to be stuff in there that teaches you how to play the game really well. There's going to be a mechanism in there that's really good. We're actually planning on building the kit bot ourselves, not to compete with it, but to understand the game better. So when the season starts, we're going to have a group that's building that robot. We've already assembled the kit chassis. I believe right now we're wiring it up with electronics. So all we'll need to do is take kind of the superstructure of the kit bot and put it on top of that robot. And then use all the Open Alliance CAD and blog posts. There are a bunch of teams who are Open Alliance. For those who don't know what that is they release everything about the robot. Their CAD is public, and they'll do updates on how their robot is progressing. There are great ideas in there, and they're going to show their priority lists, so you can kind of compare yours to theirs, see if you're understanding the game properly, see where you kind of are similar or different. Don't just copy what they're doing. Try to use what they're giving you to help better your understanding. Okay, let's see, 39. I think we have enough time to talk about trade-offs before we take a break. Trade-offs. So you you can't and should not do everything in a game. It depends on the game, right? This year, you could realistically do everything. But for a lower resource team, it's not always a great idea. A lot of teams couldn't pick up cones off the ground, especially when they were tipped over. Right? We could do that, and we were worse than some of the best teams in the world, right? 1323, 1678. These were some of the best. 1323, best robot in the world this year, right? I think a lot of people think that they lost one match. They were world champs. They could not pick up tipped over cones off the ground. They could not do absolutely everything there was to do in the game. So they decided, I guarantee, it's not that they didn't think of that. They knew it was something that existed and was part of the game. They decided that's not that important. We're going to put our resources elsewhere and just optimize full field cycles to the human player station because it's going to be the same thing every single time. You can't and shouldn't do everything. Every additional task you decide to do, it's going to come at a cost. It's going to come at a cost to other mechanisms or worse, programming and practice times. Remember that these matches, they're won and lost in Auton. Auton is really, really important for dominating, especially at the regional levels. And remember that you have partners. Again, game specific. I like to think about 2016 where you had to cross over barriers and defenses as part of your cycle and you scored points. That year we decided to make a taller robot, as we usually do, that couldn't go under this low bar that was 12 inches off the ground. A lot of teams decided they were going to go under that low bar. We had the strategical analysis that, hey, we only need one team on our lines to be able to achieve that task. We think that we'll be able to, at every stage of the game, have at least one team on our lines that can achieve that task, and we can just make sure that we do the other tasks really well. So we said, all right, let's remove that obstacle of having to build a robot that's 12 inches tall. Let's remove that obstacle and focus on the other things. So remember, you have partners. I like to think of 973 in 2019, 2020, and 2022. They were world champions in 2019, and they could not score on the top level of the rocket. They could not score everywhere. And they were number one seed in their division and world champs that year. 2020, they had a tank drive and no turret, and they were tall, and they couldn't go under the, I forget what it's called, the trench run. They couldn't go under the trench run. And they were one of the best teams in the world because they put their resources elsewhere. 2022, again, they were one of the best teams in the world. They decided that there were parts of the game they weren't going to be able to do. They had in 2022, I believe, they did not have swerve drive. They did not have swerve drive, but they were still one of the best teams in the world. And they were still on Einstein, and they couldn't even get all the way to the top. They only went to the high bar. They didn't go to the traversal bar. So they're one of the teams I always like to look at. It's like, what trade-offs did this team make? Because they're always one of the best teams in the world, and they always don't play parts of the game. Be realistic about your team's limits. Decide before the season if you're capable of doing swerve, if you're capable of building a turret, if you're capable of doing an adjustable hood, and so on. These aren't the solutions to your team's limits. You don't just go, okay, we need to make that next jump. Let's do swerve. No, you need to go, all right, swerve is limiting, not being able to have swerve is limiting us in this way. Let's figure it out before the season. We got it. We're ready to make the jump. These things take years of development. Right now, 694, we're working on a turret in the off season to understand if we can build one in the on season, right? So that work gets done over years of development. If we don't finish it this off season, we're not going to put it on a robot. We probably make more advancements the following year and make our decision off of what we're able to do. So recognize what your limits are, be realistic with them. A lot of these things are becoming much easier, swerve especially, because you could just buy modules. I think the bigger task for swerve nowadays is not in the mechanical side, because mechanically it's easy now. It's actually easier than a regular drivetrain, but the real obstacle is from a software perspective. So identifying if your software team is ready for that. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions and pull things off of your robot. This is, we talked about it a bit earlier. This could be tough. But usually, honestly, 694, we're not the best at pulling that stuff off our robot. Usually stays on way too long when it shouldn't. Sometimes you cannot achieve your goals without the functionality. So it's important to understand like what things you can and can't take off. And that's what the priority list is for. Being able to tell the difference between what you can afford to remove from your robot and what you can't. Being able to tell that difference is really big. With that, I think we'll pause here and take a break for 5 minutes and resume at 1:50. If you go to the bathroom or go to a different presentation, please feel free. Andrew, can you check that the computer speakers aren't pointed at the so the speakers aren't pointed at the computer? Because I was fighting echo pretty hard.
Wait, Mr. Blake, what are you saying? Wait, what?
Where are the speakers? So is it like coming from
they're
above?
they're like on the side, like right there.
They're where are they?
On the right there.
Oh, okay. So you see where the laptop is?
Yeah.
And see where the speakers are?
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, can we do something about the proximity of those things? Like, without breaking anything, be careful not to break anything, but maybe moving the speakers out past the laptop screen or something.
They're like wired, so you can't pull them out.
Can you just talk at the laptop? I can't hear you, Max.
Oh. Wait, it's this one. Wait, Mr. Blade, they're like wired, so like it's hard to move them further.
Turn around. Turn around. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. No, don't look at me.
Oh,
Look the other
wait, this
way.
one, this one, right?
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, Mr. Blade, you can't like pull them that far. Like maybe we could put them to the
I don't need them to
side.
be far from each other, but if like the laptop, like I'm getting some echoes. So if anything we can do to like point them away, like rotate them like a few
Oh,
degrees
point
or
them
something.
away.
Like, you still feel
Yeah, like keep
Like
them-
rotate them out
Yeah,
or something. Just because I don't know if you could notice it.
yeah.
Could you notice that I was I slurring my speech at all?
No, you weren't. It was like
Okay.
really. Yeah,
it's
it was fun.
it's really hard when you hear yourself on like a
yeah, we should like
millisecond
put it
delay.
further away from the mic, like further away from the mic. But like, can you
Be careful
pull
not
this
to
one?
mess with the speakers.
it's not. This one's not even connected.
Why? Oh,
This one's not even connected.
then which one is it? It's just this one. Then put this further away from the mic. Yeah, over there though. It's like like.
It's not. It doesn't even have to be further away. Just point it out.
Does it pull? Wait,
not
I'll
towards
keep
it.
the chair.